Friends, yes, it's another Erev Yontif. We're getting ready for Shavuot. We're getting ready for Shavuos. So allow me to please share a short idea to help us get into the spirit. The rabbis in Tractate Shabbat make a very strange comment on the word Sinai. The word Sinai, the name for the mountain upon which we receive the Torah. The Talmud asks, "My Har Sinai, why is it called Mount Sinai?" And the answer is, Har Sheyardas Sin'a Le'umot Ha'olam Alav. The word Sinai comes from the word Sin'ah, and in English that means hatred. And it is the place from where hatred emanated to the world against the Jewish people. The simple understanding of this insight is that anti-Semitism is a result of the resentment that the world harbors against the Jews for bringing a sense of conscience and moral responsibility that came along with our receiving the Torah. But Rav Gershon Henach-Leiner of Radzin, the Radziner Rebbe of the 19th century, believed that it goes much farther than that. But to understand the point, let's revisit a scene from that classic The Matrix. And what I'd like to do in order to be able to make this work is to be able to, let's see if I can make this work. Well, I'm not sure if I can make it work by playing you the film, so I'll just play you the sound from the film. Please listen.
Do we have a deal, Mr. Reagan?
You know, I know this steak doesn't exist. I know that when I put it in my mouth, the Matrix is telling my brain that it is juicy and delicious. After 9 years, you know what I realize? Ignorance is bliss.
Okay, from that film, that scene in the film, there's a character named Cypher Regan, who is part of Morpheus's team of rebels who have unplugged themselves and are living in the real world. But Cypher is tired of living outside the artificial world of the Matrix. He wants back in. So we see him in that restaurant scene with Agent Smith, who represents the computer rulers of the artificial world of the Matrix. And he just says, you know, I know this steak isn't real, but you know what? What I understand is ignorance is bliss. I want back in. You see, it's not just that the Torah gave the world a conscience. The events at Mount Sinai demonstrated to the world that we're really all living in a matrix of sorts, this existence in this physical world. The revelation that was experienced on some level by the entire world when we stood by Mount Sinai was this revelation of a metaphysical God, and it shook reality to its very core. All the things that man considers to be of value turn out to be just false constructs. Even that delicious steak that we put in our mouths isn't really there, because ein od milvado, that when we stood at Mount Sinai we realized there really is nothing to this existence, there is nothing but God. And like Cypher, many in this world wish that we hadn't been granted that knowledge of what is real and what is artificial. Ignorance is bliss. The resentment and the hatred thus comes from God having pulled back the curtain on reality through the Jewish people. That's the Sinai. This helps us answer a question that's asked by a number of commentaries. When God gave us the very first commandment, thundering from the mountain with his own voice, he introduced himself as Anochi Hashem Elokecha, I am the Lord your God, Asher Hotzeiticha me'eretz Mitzrayim mi beit avadim. I took you out of the land of Egypt from the house of bondage. Now, why did God introduce himself as the God of such a localized phenomenon? Why didn't he introduce himself with a much more impressive and global resume? In that he could have said, I'm the Lord your God who created heaven and earth. Isn't that a more impressive way of introducing yourself? The answer can be found in the word Mitzrayim, which is the Hebrew word for Egypt. The word itself is derived from Meitzar, which means confinement. Up until our liberation from Mitzrayim, The Jewish people were intellectually and existentially confined to a physical existence where nothing existed beyond their own noses and their own daily toil. What God was saying when explaining that he liberated Israel from Mitzrayim and from bondage is that he was telling humanity through the Jewish people, I have freed you from the bondage of being confined within the matrix. I have exposed you now to what real reality is, that there is an existence that's real outside of this false construct. And herein lies the secret mission for the Jewish people in receiving the Torah. Our role is not just to serve God, but to help humanity break free from the matrix. The first two commandments that we heard from God himself were the revelatory statements that true reality lies with God alone, and that therefore there should be no other gods in your life other than the true reality of Hashem. But what do we make of the other commandments, the rest of the commandments that are in the Ten Commandments and indeed in the entire Torah? What role do they play in conveying that message? Hashem was telling the Jewish people how you can fulfill this mission of liberating the rest of the world from their false reality. You might think that once a person is shown the falsehood of the physical, he should eschew it and reject it completely and live a life of complete abstinence from this false physical world. But that is precisely what God did not want Bnei Yisrael to do. His directive to them was, live in this world. Use the artificial artifacts, use the stake of this world, but handle it in such a way that the world will slowly recognize that they too are in a matrix. By living regimented lives that are governed by your Creator, you are demonstrating that on the one hand there is a greater reality than this world, but on the other hand that the Creator of this matrix wants us to live in this false construct, treat it as if it's reality, and perfect it and make it as good as possible. That is the role of all of the other mitzvot that follow the first two commandments of the Ten Commandments. It's not that we're denying reality. It's that we are acknowledging that in order to fulfill God's desire for this matrix, we have to live within it. On Shavuos morning, we'll read about the events that happened back in Sivan, the year 2448, so many thousands of years ago, when we stood at Mount Sinai and received the Ten Commandments. At the very end of the Torah portion of the laning that we're going to read tomorrow morning, the Torah seems to take a strange detour from those initial commandments. And Moshe launches into a discussion about how to build an altar that you'll use to worship God. He commands the people that when building an altar to Hashem, make sure that the ramp leading to the top of the altar does not have stairs. He says in the very concluding verse of our Torah reading, V'lo ta'aleh v'ma'alot al mizbechi asher lo tigale ervatcha alav. Do not ascend my altar with stairs, so that your nakedness not be exposed upon it. Simply meaning that if you're wearing a tunic and you take broad steps, it's not going to be a modest show of worship. Okay? But what's the connection to the aforementioned revelation of reality? Rav Leiner suggests that the deeper meaning of those words is that now that Bnei Yisrael have been chosen as the vehicle to expose true reality to the world, they must be careful about not overexposing that concept. They must be extremely subtle and discreet about sharing the esoteric knowledge with the world. When ascending that ladder of knowledge of what is real, one must be careful to take steps that are not too broad and not too strident. Rather, ascend the ladder of reality gradually, for if you don't, you run the risk of overexposing that which is meant to be hidden. Don't expose your nakedness really means don't expose the truth excessively before people are capable of handling it. Just because you've been shown the reality of the matrix or the artificiality of the matrix doesn't mean that everyone else is ready to deal with it. You must therefore conceal your knowledge by living a purposeful life within it. Be an example of how one can live in two worlds, the false world of the matrix and the real world of God's domain, where none of the physical is truly real. That's the deeper meaning of Matan Torah, and I would suggest that this message may speak to us today more than in years before. All of our constructs, our social constructs, our false illusion of financial security and medical safety, Even our religious constructs, they have all been deconstructed and dismantled before our eyes. This allows us the opportunity to reassess our true reality. We've been given the opportunity to strip down the veneer of our lives and peer more deeply into the deeper meaning of it all. This is what Matan Torah is really all about. When you read the words, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, take a pause and consider what you are really saying. Realize the liberation that has taken place for each of us from the land of Mitzrayim, the land of confinement. Use whatever remains of our isolation wisely to make new resolutions about how we will deal with the new post-pandemic reality. Will it be life going back to the way it was? Back to the rat race, being plugged back into the matrix, to making money, to eating steak, to blissfully ignoring the reality that it really is outside? The choice is yours. True Torah acceptance means accepting true reality. May we all accept the Torah tomorrow morning. May we all accept Hashem as our true reality. May we all live lives of purpose and meaning so that we can elevate this existence to its desired perfection and see the redemption. B'mheira b'yameinu. Amen. Chag Sameach, a good Yantif.